It's Wednesday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We got Mike DeFabo from The Athletic to talk about the Steelers offensive line. It looks like Troy Fautanu is going to continue to start at right tackle, but is that messing up Broderick Jones' development that he is not going in at left tackle while Dan Moore plays there? We'll talk about that, hear from Mike Tomlin. Also, we will talk about Justin Fields and throwing downfield. I have some interesting stats there and an interesting response from Tomlin. I'll get Mike DeFabo's thoughts on, as well as this upcoming matchup with the Chargers. Are these two teams really close to their styles? All that here and more on today's Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As I said before, we are joined by the man himself, Mike DeFabo. He covers the Steelers for The Athletic, of course. Mike, it's always great to have you on the show, sir. How you been?
Chris, let's get into it.
Mike loves my catchphrase, maybe more than anybody else. Like he loves that I say that, to the point where I showed up to Mike and Jenna's wedding, and the first thing I meet is Mike's older brother, who's like, "Let's get into it." I was just like,
that was actually my brother started his best man speech by saying, "Let's get into it." So the DeFabo family as a whole, big fans of the Locked On Steelers podcast, big fans of Chris.
We appreciate y'all. This was so funny when that happened. But okay, let's get to talking today. Mike, lots of uncertainty about how the Steelers offensive tackle situation will continue forward. Of course, Troy Fautanu got the start at right tackle on Sunday. Broderick Jones was rotating in with him until he wasn't, because he was benched after he had 3 penalties in a span of 6 plays, which Mike Tomlin did address. We'll get to his addressing it shortly. Dan Moore Jr. started at left tackle, and I thought did well enough. What is your read on how this is going to play out? And do you foresee Broderick Jones getting real chances to earn a starting spot sometime soon or even this year?
Yeah, I mean, they put Broderick Jones in a very interesting spot this season, because basically what was going to happen is he was going to play right tackle until they felt Troy Fautanu was ready, and ultimately that injury kind of changed that timeline, and then they were going to flip him over to left tackle. Now, that was a lot to ask this kid who's in his second season and who was a raw guy coming out of college with just 19 college starts on his resume. So I think that they were asking a lot from him, and unfortunately, it seems like they maybe put too much on his plate. And, the way I look at the dynamic right now, Broderick Jones is listed as the backup at both right tackle and left tackle. So what it seems to me is it's going to take either an injury or somebody else underperforming for him to get a starting job back, and we'll have to see if he can rotate in. I have my questions about if a rotation can even work, because, that's a position where it's so important that you have chemistry and cohesion across the offensive line. And, when you step out there, it's difficult in the middle of a game to get back up to game speed. And I think that's part of what happened to Broderick. So, I think best case scenario is Broderick benefits from a little bit of a step back. He gets a lot of reps during practice at left tackle, and ultimately the Steelers determine he's ready to step in at left tackle. But, based on the fact that he's played pretty shaky in the preseason, now into the regular season, he's also dealing with an injury. I really wonder how this second season is going to unfold for Broderick.
I do think that's a real question right now. I mean, you're looking at a situation where this guy, I thought Broderick Jones did all right last year. And you look at the run game production the Steelers had when he was put into the lineup. They went from being, one of the, bottom half of the league to being the second best at running the football in the second half of the season. And I think he deserves credit for being part of that. But at the same time, you don't get credit. Credit for past performance only goes so far. He didn't play well in the preseason, and then he didn't play great in Atlanta. I didn't think he played bad in Atlanta. I thought he played okay. But then in this game, when he was rotated in, he was called for 3 penalties. Now, I, for one, thought that some of those penalties were a little ticky-tack. False start obviously wasn't, but I thought the first hold was the second hold was also but at the same time, if you're getting nailed for penalties that quickly and you're pulling up drives, Mike Tomlin said during his press conference, you can't afford to keep doing that with this offense and this early in the year. I want to pause and give a chance for Mike Tomlin. We're going to go through some of his comments talking about this tackle situation. Here was Mike Tomlin on Tuesday when he was asked about the offensive line.
Mike, is what happened in Denver change whatever plans you had for using Broderick Jones?
It did in game. I had intentions of utilizing both guys. I acknowledged that Troy was healthy. I acknowledged that Troy was capable. That's why we started him, but I rolled him because I had concerns about his level of conditioning. He's a young guy. He's new to me. He's new to the NFL. I didn't know how fatigue would affect his play in terms of detail. And so we tried to ward off some of that. And so I had every intention of using Broderick. But when Broderick started getting highly penalized in play, I backed off of it and I held my breath and I played Troy.
How about this week?
We'll see where the roads lead. We got a week of preparation. And I'd be disrespectful to Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday if I had a hardcore plan in mind about how I was going to roll those guys. Man, I'm going to give Broderick an opportunity to rebound. He's a talented young player. I'm sure he suffered some disappointment in terms of Troy starting. It's a natural thing, but he's got to move past it, and I got to give him an opportunity to move past it as a leader. And so we'll get into this week. We'll let participation be our guide, and the quality of participation for both guys be our guide in terms of how we divvy up reps this week. It's a new week.
When you said holding penalties in September really killed drive, you said they're not collectively matured. How so? What?
It takes some time on task together to overcome 1st and 20. And so that's what I mean.
Was there something about Broderick heading into this game, or was it more of what Troy was doing that made him?
It's more reflective of what Troy was doing. Troy had been lighting it up. I don't talk a lot during the preseason, particularly about rookies, because it doesn't help me and it doesn't help them. But based on my actions in terms of putting him in the lineup, I'm sure you have an understanding of what I was looking at in team development.
You haven't rotated tackles very much. I can't remember you ever doing it. Is that something you consider a viable long-term option, or do you need to eventually be one or the other?
Rotation doesn't bother me when everyone's capable. Everyone is capable. I had very little knowledge about Troy's level of conditioning, so it was appropriate.
Outside of the penalties, is there anything else concerning about Broderick's play that has kind of led to Troy being?
The penalties were enough for the reasons I just mentioned. It is difficult for units to overcome 1st and 20 at any point in the journey, but particularly in week 2 or week 3. You better work your tail off to be penalty free, particularly when you're in hostile environments and you're getting one-dimensional in places like Denver. You can essentially shut a drive down. And so that's why we did the things that we did.
I don't know about you, Mike. I got the sense from the end of how Mike Tomlin addressed, Broderick Jones's chances again. I get a sense that he's at least going to be open-minded to say, hey, we need to get that young guy in here, because he said he's talented. They drafted him in the first round with a 14th overall pick, traded up to get him last year for a reason, and part of getting him there is going to need to be experience. But I also think that they're also trying to protect, Justin Fields right now, and they're trying to, figure out what's the best alignment they have to win their games at present. I just wonder when that Venn diagram crosses over for needing to play the best guys, but also needing to play Broderick Jones because he is one of the best guys. It just makes me wonder if that's coming. Like you said, maybe it'll take an injury, but Dan Moore Jr. has been pretty healthy most of his career so far, and it could be asking a lot for some outside circumstance other than Mike Tomlin and the Steelers just making the call. Hey, Broderick, you're going back in.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I had the same read based on the fact, we just heard the comments from Mike Tomlin when he's talking about, we need to give him an opportunity to rebound, and talking about how he's talented and he wants to see how he responds. So I think that they will give him an opportunity, either in a rotation or, just eventually playing him. But it's up to Broderick also to respond here. And I guess my biggest criticism of this whole thing is when you drafted Broderick Jones 14th overall and you decided that you were going to move up to get him, what you got was a guy who ran the fastest 40 of any lineman in the draft. So you knew that he was supremely athletic and really mobile. You also knew, based on his height, weight, physical dimensions, that he had the size and the strength to become eventually at some point a really solid left tackle. But whatever team was going to draft him, they also had to look at his 19 college starts and realize this is a very, very raw football player, and more raw than what you would typically get in the first round. So development was going to be the most important factor in terms of Broderick Jones having success or Broderick Jones failing at the NFL level. And that's where I feel like they've just put too much on his plate. And I feel like right now, if I'm the Steelers, you're in a difficult spot because you've got Dan Moore, who can only play left tackle, and Troy Fautanu, who you've gone through the hassle of transitioning him over to a right tackle. You really don't want to give a young guy who's a rookie so much on their plate that they're the swing tackle. So I understand why Broderick has to be the swing tackle and take reps at both, but I would really prefer that he's taking the overwhelming majority of his reps at left tackle, preparing for the position that's going to be his future. And then in a pinch, if you must play him at right tackle, then you can throw him in. But I think they really need to streamline things here, and they really need to prioritize Broderick's future as the left tackle and make that paramount above all else.
I think that they need to streamline it, like you said. And listen, if he's very bad, that's a different situation. But like in this situation, 2 holding penalties that really set back. And like the crazy part is the second holding penalty offset the play that Justin Fields made to erase the first holding penalty, because that was a 50-yard bomb that wiped out 2nd and long.
That was a fantastic throw. That was probably Justin Fields' best moment, and it got wiped out. I mean, to throw on the run off of 1 foot, that ball sailed 45 yards in the air and perfectly on target to George Pickens. That was a phenomenal play by Justin Fields that got wiped out. And I know this podcast isn't to talk about Justin Fields, but I've said that he played better than his stat line suggests.
I agree.
That play, a touchdown getting wiped away, a couple big gains on defensive pass interference where he had nice ball placement. He did play better, but he's also got to have better support from the line in front of him. And this is going to be an interesting crossroads for the Steelers, because the whole thought process was, we're going to make these picks that they're not sexy, they're not that interesting, we're going to load up on linemen, but it's like putting money in the bank account, Chris. Eventually you're going to have that interest, and you're going to feel pretty good when you look at your bank account and you've got a little bit of savings. If you're unable to develop these linemen and you're ending up having to go and find out a solution elsewhere, that's going to be challenging for the Steelers to overcome. So, they want to be this dominant running team. They want to be built on their offensive line. Developing the first ever pick of the Omar Khan tenure is going to be critical. Absolutely.
I think 1,000%. Broderick Jones, developing him needs to be a priority. They need to figure out how they're going to do that with their current alignment of offensive line.
The other question, Chris, and I'll ask you a question, pretend that I'm the host.
Okay.
What about the injury situation? Broderick is clearly less than 100% right now. He's playing with a big brace on his elbow. And at least from my observation, you're the offensive lineman, Chris, it looks like he has no punch with that arm. One of the holding calls, the guy basically crumpled his arm like it was nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I don't know the full extent of what the injury is, but reading between the lines based on when Broderick says I'm as healthy as I'm going to be, to me, I read that as I'm going to probably need some kind of an off-season surgery. I wonder if internally the Steelers can think about something like that. Like, I don't know if this is a surgery that's going to take months and is going to eliminate him for this entire season, but if it's something he can come back to, if he's less than 100% right now, he's going through struggles. Are you hurting his confidence and his development even more by playing him hurt than you would be to, sideline him for a little bit, let him get healthy, and then put him back in the lineup?
It's a very good question, and it's one that I've thought about. I even wrote about it in the preseason in the second game when they played the Bills, and I said that guy can't punch right now. And I agree. On one of those holding penalties, the guy got in on his chest, and you just saw no aggressive pushback from Broderick Jones, and I haven't seen it really with his hands all preseason to all regular season now. And I guess it's just 2 games regular season. I do think there's something seriously wrong there. And it might be something that you're saying, either A, it just needs to heal on its own over time and it'll get there, or B, it does need surgery and they just don't want to do that right now. Because if you take out Broderick Jones out of this rotation and one of those offensive tackles goes down, you're in a much worse situation than you are right now. So there might be some other serious factors here.
Which is why Broderick struggling is such a significant thing here, because he's supposed to be good at both sides, and when he's underwhelming and underperforming at right tackle, that's pretty tough. If he's already struggling at one position and he's supposed to be great at both of them, where does that leave you?
It's a great question, and one that I think needs to continue to be explored and will be continue to be explored as we continue to watch how these tackles play out this season. But I do want to get to Justin Fields and that downfield passing because we talked to Mike Tomlin about that as well. We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Mike DeFabo, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by DoorDash. Football is back, and I don't know about you, but when I'm watching big-time games, I need big-time food. And there's no better place to get all your favorites than DoorDash. As a Pittsburgher born and bred, DoorDash gets me all my favorites, whether that's a sandwich with fries on it from Permani's, wings from Big Shot Bob's, or a fresh pie from Pizza Bellino. I can get all of that delivered with DoorDash. DoorDash is the best on-demand delivery platform around to help you get all your favorites, including groceries. All of that gets delivered right to your door. So when you need a quick answer for food on game day and you're stuck in the house, download the DoorDash app and you can order your favorite foods, or DoorDash can deliver you a big win while your team fights to win the big game. Use promo code LOCKEDFALL24 to get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. It's a limited time offer. Terms and conditions apply. Promo code is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app today and order your game day favorites. Must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol available only in select markets. We're also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. You've heard us talk about FanDuel a lot, America's number one sportsbook. This week, of course, the Steelers are taking on the Chargers. And as we said last week, the Steelers went into the Broncos situation. They finally get a home game, and we know the Steelers automatically get 3 points for being home favorites. Well, they're 1.5 point favorites, so that should tell you something about how FanDuel feels about the Steelers' chances in this game. But they're minus 124 as far as their money line right now. Chargers are plus 106, and the over/under was set at 36.5 yesterday. It is now 35.5 today. So I do wonder what's pushing that line down and whether the overall lines for this game will change. But you can get all those lines and make all those bets on America's number one sportsbook at FanDuel. Download the app today. And now through September 22nd, if you go on FanDuel, all FanDuel customers, all you have to do is bet $5 and you will get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season, Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's number one sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com to download FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. Mike, let's talk a little bit here about Justin Fields for a sec, because Justin Fields, like you said, I felt like his performance was not highlighted enough in the stats. It can't be shown up in the stats, but his abilities to throw the ball downfield, to use his legs, and I think also to stick to what the Steelers are asking him to do, because there's also still a limited capacity of what they're asking him to do. He could throw to the middle part of the field this week. Also, I thought it was kind of funny, a point Alan Saunders brought up on yesterday's podcast is that people were like, why would they not throw to the middle part of the field against the Falcons? Then how did Jalen Hurts lose but throwing to the middle part of the field where Jesse Bates intercepted it at the end of that game? But what has been your assessment of how Justin Fields has taken his shots downfield? Do you feel like you're seeing potential there that can grow, or is it just like, hey, it's too small of a sample size for the numbers? Just so you have them right now. Justin Fields has attempted 12 passes that have been targeted beyond the sticks. 8 of those have been completed for 139 yards and 1 touchdown so far.
Yeah, I kind of like what the Steelers are doing in the sense that they're not trying to give Justin Fields too much. This is an offense that we know wants to run the football, and that's been their primary objective. And then a lot of the throws have been quick game, easy throws, get the ball out of Justin Fields' hands. And he has the fewest air yards per attempt at any point in his career to this point. It's about 6.1, 6.2 yards per attempt. And I think that that's a reasonable strategy. And then what I like is they're also infusing that with the timely deep shot downfield. And I felt like, especially against the Atlanta Falcons, it was an even more conservative game plan, but that deep ball was even more effective because they were able to pick their spots in terms of when to throw it. And I think this is going to be a central part of this offense, no matter who the quarterback is. We know that Russell Wilson, one of his best attributes is the deep ball. And if you look back to Arthur Smith's best offenses, 2019 and 2020 in Tennessee, that was a big part of it, was we're going to take the occasional deep shot, and that's going to be what adds the explosive elements to what otherwise seems like an offense that's 3 yards in a cloud of dust. So to this point, I really like it, and I think that Justin is more than capable of throwing the deep ball. He has the arm talent to make the throw. His mobility adds an extra dimension where he buys himself a little bit more time. And I even think that they can do more in terms of asking him to throw on the run with bootlegs and nageds and things of that nature. So, I think that finding that balance is going to be a big key to adding the explosive element in terms of how much do you want to be conservative and how much do you want to choose and decide when you want to attack downfield.
Absolutely. Here was Mike Tomlin when I asked him how he felt about how Justin Fields has been handling it. And like you said, he said, as much as it's on Justin Fields for the success he's had, it's also been kind of a sign about how the Steelers have wanted to approach attacking downfield. Here was Mike Tomlin when we asked him about that Tuesday.
12 passes beyond the sticks so far this season, but he's completed 8 of them. He's been efficient in doing so. How have you liked how he's picked his shots, or assessed how he's taken those shots?
That's not only reflective of his capabilities and mindset. That's probably reflective of our mindset as a collective. We want to be aggressive in terms of going downfield, but we also want to be prudent because incomplete passes and things of that nature get you behind the sticks. And we've been in hostile environments through 2 weeks that we wanted to minimize. It's important, guys, in September that you avoid third and long, particularly if your first two games on the road. And so we have been really thoughtful and intentional about our approach to business through the first 2 weeks because of environmental reasons and our lack of collective development and the number of young people that we've had in some significant positions like center and left guard and so forth.
So I don't know about you, Mike. I buy into this explanation here from Mike Tomlin because this is a very young offense. And I said this, people during the games like, oh, why can't they be aggressive? Why is Mike Tomlin so scared to just go downfield, just attack? And I'm like, guys, as we said all offseason, the strength of this upcoming team, however much you were excited about the quarterback situation and however many offensive linemen they drafted that looked like they're going to be really good, this team's strength is still going to be its defense. And for its offense to succeed in such a young stage with a brand new offensive coordinator, you have a 25-year-old quarterback. Maybe you'll get a 35-year-old quarterback back soon. Who knows how that'll play out. You have a center in his second start, a left guard in his second start, now a right tackle in his first start. You have George Pickens in his third year. You got all these. There's so much new and young to this offense. Mike Tomlin is simply saying, I'm just trying not to put these guys in too tough a situation. And if you take too many downfield shots, you miss the chance to stay ahead of the chains and to win the down and distance part of the game, which is what this young offense really needs. Mike, does that make sense to you, or do you think that he's covering up a bigger problem?
No, I mean, at some point, the Steelers are going to be in a game where they're going to have to open things up. They're going to have to score points.
Right.
But right now, the defense has done its job enough that you haven't had to. And I do think it's reasonable that, to try not to put too much on Justin Fields' plate. Like the best hope for Justin Fields is that the Bears really screwed him up by throwing him into the fire too early. And he was supposed to basically redshirt his rookie season, but it was an Andy Dalton injury that threw him into the lineup before he was ready. And, in his career, one of the big criticisms of Justin Fields has been that he turns the football over. Well, through 2 games, he's been perfect in that department. He has not turned the ball over. And when you do have a defense as good as the Steelers have, that's going to be one of the most important stats. I mean, I think that's why Kenny Pickett kept his job as long as he did. That was one of the main things that I think interested the Steelers in Russell Wilson, is he's not a guy that throws a lot of interceptions. So, I understand that. And what I would like to just see is, if Justin Fields continues to get opportunities, does he continue to show growth and earn more trust? And does he become more confident and comfortable? And I think that that's another aspect of this is I think they're trying to rebuild some of Justin Fields' confidence in himself. And, by giving him easier completions And by not throwing so much downfield, I think that they're finding ways to do that. And so I think this is going to be an evolution. I think that the offensive line needs to gel a little bit better. The Steelers need to really improve their yards per carry and their yards before contact. And then when they do improve the running game, they can then therefore open up the passing game more. So, I really don't hate the approach, to be honest with you. I think that both of these quarterbacks have their limitations. And when you went out and you acquired them for as little as the Steelers did, you're almost in a sense trying to win in spite of the quarterback. So many teams think we're going to draft a quarterback and all of a sudden we're going to be a contender. The Steelers are kind of taking the opposite approach. We're going to build a complete team so that we don't have to put so much on the quarterback. And it doesn't have to be we're going to win or lose on Justin Fields. We're going to win or lose based on a team, and Justin Fields is going to be one component of that.
I think that's entirely the plan right now. When you don't have the chess pieces to zig, why not zag? I think that's very much what the Steelers are doing with this current situation that they have. I've been saying that for a few years, that like, hey, unless they go and get that superstar quarterback in the draft and it works out and it's awesome, they need to figure out other ways to win. I think that's what they're doing right now, and I think that's part of what comes with it. But again, the timing of the downfield passing is so important, and also knowing when to win there is very important. And like you said, Justin Fields, his best ball in date was the deep ball, and the one that he threw to George Pickens that got called back. If they're able to hit on 2 or 3 of those a game, it can really open things up for the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tennessee was, I believe, like 6th best in scoring offense during Arthur Smith's best season there. And so, a lot of people look at Arthur Smith's offense and they think it has to be low scoring or it has to be boring. But again, it was infusing the deep ball that really made the difference for them. So, I mean, I think it's when you hired this coordinator, when you brought in these quarterbacks, you knew that they could both throw the deep ball, and you knew that the coordinator wanted to run the football. So there is a clear strategy and approach. You might not agree with it, and you might want it to be more interesting and more open. But, this from the moment they hired Arthur Smith and brought in these 2 quarterbacks, this was going to be the plan going forward.
I agree. I think this has been the look of what they want there. I want to talk about this upcoming matchup with the Chargers, because I think there are some decent similarities that are going to show up in this game when you see how these 2 teams play. We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you, this show is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the website you need to go to today to get all your tickets to your favorite events. You got Major League Baseball playoffs are right around the corner. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for all your favorite events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you the only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find them. Right now, you can find a super deal for the Steelers home opener against the Chargers this Sunday and get lower bowl tickets for just $214. If you've never been to a Steelers game, you're missing out. If you've never been to a Steelers home opener game, you're missing out on a festive activity. So don't miss out and go get Game Time today. Game Time is the app you can download to get all your music, sports, comedy, theater tickets. They have all the different events that you can access there. They also have a best price guarantee that can't be beat. If you download Game Time promises that you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter here with Mike DeFabo, talking all things Steelers. Now, Mike, I think this is going to be an interesting test this week, because the Steelers faced an old quarterback in Kirk Cousins in Week 1, and a team that had certain strengths. But that was that situation. Then they faced a definitively young quarterback in Bo Nix, who's a rookie in his second start in the Broncos. But now they go and face a veteran quarterback who has a high pedigree, and everyone's been waiting to take off, and that's Justin Herbert. But these 2 teams play very similarly right now. Justin Herbert, maybe last year was thought to be a quarterback that could sling it all over the yard. This year, they're running the football more. They're playing a lot like the Steelers because Jim Harbaugh has joined there. And if you don't believe me on how close these things are, the Steelers right now are the number 2 scoring defense in the NFL. The Chargers are the number 1. The Steelers right now have the fifth fewest, yards allowed in the NFL. The Chargers have the second fewest. The Chargers are also 4th in creating turnovers, while the Steelers are 2nd right now. So you look at how these two defenses have played. They're physical. They're aggressive. They want to play that kind of ball. Mike, what do you think the Steelers have to do this week to try to take advantage of how these two teams will match up on different sides of the ball?
Well, like you mentioned, it's kind of looking in the mirror at yourself. And since you handled the defensive side, I'll talk about the Chargers offense. The Steelers, we know, big into 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends, run the football. Well, the Chargers are very similar. They lead the league in 22 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, 2 running backs. So very much like those Michigan offenses, this is going to be a team that comes out with a heavy personnel grouping, a fullback, tells you they're going to run the football, does it anyway. The difference is the Chargers have been much, much more efficient running the football. The Steelers are at the top of the league in rushing attempts, but near the bottom in yards per carry. The Chargers are near the top in both departments. So, the Steelers have done a very good job to this point stopping the run. I think Cam Hayward has come back and looked very solid. I think that Keanu Benton is showing that he's going to take a step forward. And probably the most encouraging part of the defensive front has been Larry Ogunjobi. Looks like the player that you signed to a big contract a couple years ago. He's finally healthy. He's getting in the backfield, tackles for loss, winning his matchups at the line of scrimmage. So to this point, the Steelers have made both of their first 2 opponents largely one-dimensional by shutting down the run. They're one of the best teams in the league at stopping the run. I see this as their biggest test in that department. If they're able to stop the run or at least, handle it and manage the run, then I think that they're going to be in this game. But if the Chargers are in a situation, they're running the ball effectively, they can play action, get Justin Herbert out on the move, allow him to open things up and add their deep ball, that's where they're going to have a long day. So for me, it starts and ends with the Steelers on defense. Like, can you shut down that run? How are you going to handle that big body in the backfield at fullback? And I think that that's really going to tell the story of how this matchup unfolds.
Agree that the Steelers are going to need to be able to win in the trenches on at least one of the sides of the ball. They really need to do it on both sides of the ball.
And Chris, you mentioned before that the under on FanDuel has dropped already a point. You can see why. Both teams want to run the ball like crazy. Both teams have great defenses, and the Steelers have plenty of question marks on offense. I really imagine that this is going to be a tight, low-scoring rock fight type of game like we've seen so often with the Steelers.
Agreed. And this is also a team that, like the Steelers, has invested recently in their offensive tackle position. Joe Alt, the first offensive lineman off the board this year. Rashawn Slater, one of the first offensive tackles off the board very recently as well. This is an offensive line that they've got some young, mean, nasty guys to, and I think that's where the Steelers are hoping to see their young offensive line come out and make a difference too. I ask you this, at a precursory look over how these two teams match up, one thing that I always look at, and that helps me determine who I pick and how I look at a game, is how much better, what is the margin between one team's defensive line versus the other offensive line and the other team's defensive line to their opposing offensive line. And whichever team has that advantage as far as which defensive line is that much better than the other team's offensive line, that to me is a big factor as far as how games will come out. If you were to look at it, how far ahead do you see the Steelers' defensive front being ahead of the Chargers' offensive front, and vice versa? How far ahead do you see the Chargers' defensive front being ahead of what the Steelers are doing on their offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this, based on the rushing numbers that the Chargers have put up and the rushing defense the Steelers have, I think that they're kind of neck and neck right now. And I would give the advantage to the Steelers. I think that they have an edge there in terms of their defensive line going against the Chargers offensive line. But I think that the gap is bigger when it comes to the Chargers defensive front versus the Steelers young offensive line. Just because of the fact that, as we've been talking about, a lot of moving pieces up front, a lot of inexperience. I've loved what I've seen out of Zach Frazier. I think Troy Fautanu is going to be a really good player, and he played well in his debut. Spencer Anderson is still a fill-in type of guy that I think is playing at a backup quality level at this point. And I also wonder if Jim Harbaugh can throw some different looks at this group that they haven't seen yet that's going to challenge them in a different way. So it's going to be definitely an old school, smash mouth type of football game, and it will test both the offensive and defensive front for the Steelers.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a big story all week long. How will the trenches go? Will the Steelers be able to control the line of scrimmage against the Chargers? If they are, it can make the world of difference. We'll come back with more of this with Crossover Thursday as I talk to guys from Locked On Chargers on tomorrow's episode. But Mike, thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, definitely. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike DeFabo, and you can catch all my stuff on The Athletic.
Absolutely. He's Mike DeFabo. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. And thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers. Back here tomorrow with Crossover Thursday.